Hi everyone, it's Raina. So this video is for the moon in Pisces. Pisces is a mutable water sign. So there is a great chance that a moon in Pisces person can be easily swayed emotionally by others. And they have a very receptive nature, in other words. And this can allow for great creativity because when you take in the stimuli, the sense impressions around you, you can utilize this and create a whole new world. And that's kind of what writing a novel is, or painting a picture. You know, in your mind's eye, you can see a scene. And, you know, the more vivid your memory is, the more you can reproduce it in a way that other people can feel like they're right there. And that's kind of what the moon in Pisces is. Now, I would say that this placement is that of the old soul. When I see somebody with a prominent Pisces, I think that they've probably been through a lot in their life. Maybe there are some moon in Pisces, sun in Pisces people who have a perfectly normal and event-free childhood, and their adulthood is the same. But I would say that there are definitely going to be some who experience some situation that makes them understand that everyone has flaws. And this actually allows them to not put people on a pedestal, but still love them anyway. An example would be growing up with a parent with an addiction and realizing that parents may have parts of themselves that are not as strong as other parts of themselves, whereas other children may think their parents are superheroes and that they never make mistakes and things like that. A moon in Pisces person knows all too well, even in childhood, that everyone is fallible. And this is almost like what a minister feels like, that everyone has brokenness within them. Nobody is perfect in their behavior. We all have unblemished souls maybe, but our actual actions may suggest otherwise. And the beautiful thing about the moon in Pisces is the acceptance of others where they're at right now, which is not always the case with other people. Many people are judgmental, let's face it. You know, if you've ever seen a news story about a horrible thing that happens, and even when it's a parent doing horribly abusive things to their children, the comments that follow are, just along the same lines as those that violent mentality, because a lot of people can only see things from the perspective of what is happening now. They can't see the broad picture where the parent may have been abused. And so a moon in Pisces person understands that hurt people, and they may not even, understand that in a conscious way, but they treat people as if they know, as if they can see the goodness within them, even when they are acting out. This same beautiful quality can turn against them when they lack discrimination, which they can very definitely do. And this is when they feel that sense of compassion. It moves them, and they don't want to hurt that person because they know that person is very vulnerable. Even if the person is extremely destructive to others, they can see the fragility of their psyche. They can just sense it because Pisces is probably the most psychic sign in an overt way. And the moon in Pisces, forget about it. The moon is intuitive. So you put the two together and you're getting someone who is incredibly intuitive. And yet, again, intuition, having a strong intuition does not always mean that someone is able to make the best decisions for themselves. Your emotions can distort your emotions can distort how you perceive things, and therefore the actions that you take as a result. And that is where a Moon in Pisces person has to kind of get it together, because otherwise they will make a beeline to the type of person who is most likely to ruin their life, and so that definitely can be a pattern that needs to be broken with Moon in Pisces. The other thing too is this issue surrounding self-pity, because again, if the Moon in Pisces person does come from a background that is pretty traumatic, even in some cases, in more extreme cases, they may have a sense of learned helplessness where when they were children, they really literally were helpless. They were at the mercy of a crazy parent, or, and crazy could be intoxicated parent, or someone who abused their power with them that was that came into their life in some way. And this can lead them to erroneously believe that they are always going to be in this position. So whatever I was in childhood, now I am as an adult, and that's not true. And so what happens is, I've read this, which makes perfect sense to me, that when you're a child and you are abused, and you get old enough where you're away from the perpetrator, whoever that perpetrator is, you take over. So if somebody beats up on you, and let's just say it's emotionally, then you start beating up on yourself. And Moon in Pisces people can be very insecure, have low self-esteem, and yet there's a humility there, there really is, unless it goes the opposite direction, which is like almost to the point of narcissism, where the person feels so inferior that they become obsessed with their inferiority. And they love to talk about, what a piece of, what they are. And that becomes a form of self-absorption, even though it's the other side of the narcissist who's always bragging. So the thing that can actually be a nice influence of the Moon in Pisces, if the person has a sun sign like Aries or Leo, where they tend to be arrogant sometimes, full of themselves, and boastful, just kind of self-absorbed, the Moon in Pisces can make them a lot more thoughtful, a lot less loud and promoting themselves all the time, and maybe even a little bit insecure. But sometimes that can be a great balance to somebody who has a tendency towards arrogance, where they're not so sure of themselves 100% of the time. So one of the challenges of a Moon in Pisces is indecision. And this, again, is because of the mutable quality that Pisces has in spades, because not only are they a mutable sign, but the water is this element that there's that book, I never read it, called The Secret Language of Water or something like that. I've heard so much about it, but I've never gotten around to actually reading it. And it's like how this, I think he was a scientist, I'm assuming, but he programmed water by talking to it, and it changed its structure. So this is something that a Moon in Pisces person can really interact with their surroundings and be programmed by those around them. It's very important that a Moon in Pisces person takes an active interest in their surroundings. It could be people, places, and things. I think they talk about that in Alcoholics Anonymous, about being concerned about those elements in your life, because people can really influence them, and they can become like chameleons to their environment, which can help them actually in childhood. If you have a rough environment in childhood, and you can become and you can be adaptable, that's really a wonderful thing, because you can be a survivor of whatever is thrown at you more easily than someone who has a hard time changing. So also being very thoughtful about the places that they go, because, where you go, you're going to attract a certain vibration. If you go into, just think of the different vibration of a tavern and a chapel. Nobody can say that they have the same vibration. Now, I'm not saying that going into a tavern automatically means that you're in some kind of a low energy place. However, we know that there is a difference in how it affects us. Okay, so it's about being very conscious of the fact that you are so impressionable and taking precautions. You're a natural empath, especially because it's a moon sign. So you may not even be aware of having mood changes that you may say to yourself, why do I feel sad right now? There's no reason for me to feel sad. You may be taking on the emotions of somebody next to you, or sensing a family member that is far away, but you know what they're kind of going through telepathically, or whatever you want to call it. So that kind of thing has to be, the more conscious a Moon in Pisces person can be, the more proactive they can be, because they're not going to be floating in the ether and not knowing exactly what's happening to them. Another thing, too, is that Neptune, the ruler of Pisces, doesn't have boundaries. Okay, there's a lot of fogginess associated with Neptune, confusion, and even delusion and things like that. And so the more a Pisces moon can be, can do things in life that create a sense of structure and boundaries, the better. So emotional boundaries in relationships, having a line that people cannot cross, and letting them know when they've crossed it, not just kind of allowing anything to happen, because that can lead to being a doormat, and you don't want to be a doormat. And this is what I was trying to get to also, of not allowing people to disrespect you, obviously abuse you, but to disrespect is a form of abuse. It's a form of emotional abuse, and people have to realize that this is not a part of a normal relationship. A normal relationship should not involve being disrespected. Now, that doesn't mean that people do not ever say anything that hurts the feelings of someone that they love dearly. These things can happen, but it's not a concerted effort to tear down somebody. It's in the heat of the moment, and it's not all the time. So that's how you tell the difference. If you're confused about whether or not you're being treated properly, I would go with something like that, of understanding that nobody is perfect, and they're not going to always treat you perfectly, but they're not going to make it a habit of saying mean things to you and being like that. And learning how to be happy with your life as it is. Neptune is very idealistic, and Moon in Pisces people may be prone to fantasy. They may be prone to fantasizing the perfect relationship, the Harlequin romance type of deal where they're swept off their feet and it's always like perfect. And I always use the analogy of the dirty socks on the floor. That is what love ends up being at some point. And if that bothers you, and it's depressing to consider that the greatest love of your life is going to, at one point, leave dirty socks on the floor, unless they are very anal and they're like, is it Felix Unger in The Odd Couple? Was he the neat freak? The person who is, maybe you're the one that leaves the socks on the floor, but I would prefer having the socks on the floor, I think, to having a neat freak, because then they're going to be always on me. So anyway, that has to be integrated into your understanding of life so that you're not constantly disappointed by the mundanity of life, how life can just be ordinary moments, and that you can appreciate those ordinary moments and not long for something more. I think that with the Moon in Pisces, the longing is spiritual, because Pisces and Neptune, the 12th house, is their domain. That's the spiritual dimension. So Pisces being so in touch with that, you may have memories of past lives or in between lives. And I talk about that book, Michael Newton, Journey of Souls, where he talks about in between lifetimes. And, really fascinating stuff. But that feeling of, I remember what it was like to be in that state, and wanting that state here, and not fully accepting the 3D reality of this world. Maybe a star seed. If you have memories of a star system, coming from a star system, you may feel longing for that, and it may be hard to feel comfortable on planet Earth. So learning how to accept this and even be happy here, and be and not feeling sorry for yourself, big thing. I think that out of anything that I can say for somebody with the Moon in Pisces, always guard against self-pity, because in our mainstream society, through social media and just in many other, and through politics and social media, there is a concerted effort to get people to feel sorry for themselves and to think of themselves as victims, eternal victims. And this activates within people a feeling of powerlessness. And I really, truly believe that this is done by design to create people who are more easy to control. And so Moon in Pisces, guard against those tendencies, because sometimes I think certain people, they confuse pity with respect. You don't want people to feel sorry for you. You want people to respect you. And if you feel like a victim of life, examine it. Do some self-inquiry to see if your beliefs are really in alignment with the truth of your situation, because you may be very surprised to learn that they are not. That you are choosing to view yourself, or, to emotionally connect with perhaps the past, something that was true for you when you were young, but now you have the opportunity to take inspired action and change certain things, and live the life of your dreams. Because really, as I said, Neptune, Pisces, very idealistic, and you have great power. You have a great power of visualization. So use that to your advantage, and in order to manifest your dream reality. Alrighty then. Well, I hope you enjoyed this, And if you'd like a private reading, one that's similar to this and goes even more extensively is my natal chart interpretation. It also looks at the next 12 months in certain areas of your life when things start to light up. And the link to my website is below. Take care of yourselves. Bye.